We ended off talking about what's possible on the other side of role clarity and when individuals take possession even of their own strategy that allows them to interact well with other members of the team. Um, and I'm not sure where we left off exactly.
So you were asking what some of the risks were, what comes up along the way, what some of the conflicts are, what it's like to have to work through them as we were trying to work through them.
Exactly, those items.
So the first one is really about just people trusting that you actually mean it when you are saying we're going to create a model where leadership is more distributed and we're all going to own this strategy together. So the first barrier is getting people to believe you. The second barrier is once people believe you, there's testing that goes on throughout the process to say, okay, I'm over that hurdle, I'll sort of buy in, and now I'm going to test it. And so everybody's testing a little bit along the way to try to figure out whether or not, how far we can actually go with this. And I think every time those tests happen, there's got to be an awareness called to the fact that we're testing it, so that whether it works or whether it doesn't work, that we keep coming back to the table and saying that we're still learning. And that's the third part of it, is the process doesn't unfold perfectly. And so there are many times when you try something and it's a new language, it's a new way of working together, it doesn't go as smoothly as we'd all hoped that it would. For some people who are maybe nervous to put both feet in, that's affirming because they feel like, oh, I knew it wasn't going to work anyway, so now I can pull back, especially if this is uncomfortable for me. And the challenge for a leader is how to allow those opportunities to fail to happen and still keep people invested in the process along the way. And to also be transparent about yourself as a learner in this experience without abdicating your responsibility to be a leader in the situation, to define for others what it is going to look like for you as the leader to also be learning with the team.
Could you say something about two things? One is people wonder, why are we at our clients' growth area for 2 or 3 years? And the idea that we're going to have one meeting and we're going to walk away. What is the advantage of having that accountability from an outside source along the way? And secondly, the role of coaching. Even if it's a coaching conversation, not necessarily a big one-year engagement, but a place where you can really go. Can you say the role of time and also the role of coaching in that process you described?
So the first thing I would say is I believe both of them are critically important to the work. And so we went into this believing we could do a once and done. We're going to have an alignment meeting. They're saying to us, we're going to have to stay in this for a couple of years. We'll see. We've been down this road before. We'll be able to handle it ourselves. I think part of what was powerful about the experience is Growth River's ability to foreshadow for us a little bit about what might be down the road. And rather than see those things as problems, we saw them as milestones. So I remember a conversation early on where, Richard said, the next place you're going to get to, when you're starting to figure out how resources have to get reallocated across the organization because people have owned a strategy and now you're questioning whether these resources and strategies are aligned with your mission, you will have reached the next phase of development. And I remember the day we were sitting in a team meeting and we hit that point and people were really frustrated. And I was able to say, remember when we heard that this was actually we're here now. And to have this relationship over time with Growth River allows you to actually grow through the process at your own pace and to recognize that you're going to come back to the table and check in and work through the next layer of the onion, which you don't even necessarily know what it's going to feel like when you get there because you haven't gotten there yet. I also think that it's an accountability measure. And so there is a time in this process when it gets very difficult, and that's generally the time you get a call from Growth River saying it's the next time for your team alignment. And I remember we always tried to ignore those calls for a little bit, push them off for a little bit, not so much because we didn't see the value in it, but because we knew that it was going to be difficult work. And we knew we hadn't done everything that we had hoped to do once we got into the process. And so the accountability part of it also is very important to continuing to work through it, because there's critical points in time in this transformation where you could go either way. And I think knowing that this isn't just a once and done, but this is going to be over an extended period of time is really important. As the leader, having participated in some of the coaching work, I think the other The other part is that you're learning and growing. You can only go as far, your team can only go as far as you're willing to go yourself. And so having a coach who understands from a strategy perspective what it is that you're trying to do inside of your organization, and then so having participated in the coaching alongside the organizational development work was really important for me as a leader, because I realized going into it that I was only going to be able to take the team as far as I was willing to go myself. And so the coaching really gave me a space to talk through where I felt I was getting stuck in my own development and to get very concrete strategies. I think where Growth River is unique is this combination of concrete strategies that give you some really technical ways to solve some of the problems coming at you, and also not to let you off the hook that these are all technical problems, and to really understand the ways that these are adaptive challenges, and to really push you into that space of saying you can't solve adaptive challenges with technical solutions. So we will give you technical solutions, but you can't duck the fact that this is about human relationships and connections.
Here's the confidence we want to give our clients, that you can actually do the work, the ongoing work, and do the strategy work at the same time, and the teamwork at the same time. Could you just say something? You're talking about that, but what does that feel like to do the work and actually have this process go on at the same time? It's a lot, yet that's what we're about. That's what we're trying to allow our clients to do.
So it is a lot, and I also think that the pacing of it becomes critically important in the work that you're doing inside the organization. You've got to move the agenda quickly enough that people don't lose faith in the fact that you're serious about trying to change the things that you say you're trying to change. At the same time, it is true, and in an organization like ours that was on a significant growth curve annually, over a 5 or 6 year period where we were just taking on more and more work and more responsibilities, we were there to perform a service and a set of services to the city and to young people in the city, and that wasn't going to go away. So part of it is being able to understand the way the process is the work, and to bring opportunities into the team pretty immediately where they can see some short-term victories about how communicating in a new way, organizing ourselves in a new way, actually makes the work that we need to deliver more sustainable, more impactful, bring more energy inside the organization. And so I think there is a strategy to the pacing and how that goes forward.
Laura, can you make a comment or two about being a CEO in this day and age? You've got funding problems, you've got talent issues, you've got moving targets in terms of your target audience, all of that. Maybe some of the top line challenges that you feel are addressed and or ought to be addressed in a process called strategic alignment.
So I think that there are certainly challenges that we all face in terms of, board governance, in terms of talent acquisition, really how to find people who can do the work in the way that we need and want the work done. There are certainly funding is a constantly evolving playing field, and who your primary funder is today may be not in the picture at all tomorrow, and so the constant ability to manage those relationships and continue the development work while you're also trying to implement strategy work can be challenging, especially when development strategy don't line up. And you have to ask yourself some hard questions about what do you do when that happens. The politics of the work that we increasingly find ourselves in the middle of, and so the relationship between the ideology and the politics and the funding all come together in ways that can be very difficult if you're a leader of an organization trying to live out a mission and not just a trend, which I think gets very challenging. I think, though, the biggest challenge we face are challenges that we create ourselves. And I think the two challenges that we face as leaders that are completely self-imposed are one, doing our work in unnatural silos. And so very often, because of the way funding is structured, because of the way politics are organized, we create a box for ourselves and for the work that we do. And that box sometimes doesn't allow us to think outside of our individual mission that we're trying to accomplish in our organization, but what would it actually look like if we did live out this ecosystem approach to change, and what would that mean for how organizations would work together, how problems would get diagnosed, how opportunities would get identified. And I think it would fundamentally bring a lot more energy into the field, because very often we're trying to solve these problems from a very narrow lens, and we can't solve them from that lens, and so it becomes frustrating because the solutions don't present themselves. And so opening ourselves up beyond the work we're doing inside of our own organization, I think is a really important thing for leaders to take on. And the second part of that I think is self-imposed is the longer you're a leader, and the more notoriety the work that you're doing gets in the field, there is a real hunger for solutions. And people want to talk about the solutions and celebrate the solutions. And it's always been interesting to me whenever people have done a case study on the organization or on my own work, and I try to bring up all of the failures and all of the obstacles and all of the challenges that were part of that and still aren't solved. Generally, the response I get is, we understand all that, but what we want to focus on is the success. And our inability to define the success and the failure as living together in a really important way in this work means that leaders often have to hide the things that aren't working. And we don't use that as a way to propel our work forward and move the field forward. And I think the longer you're doing this and the more notoriety your work gets, the harder it is to air out some of the challenges that you're facing.
Nice. A couple more, maybe one or two more. And
You guys have a permit